All right, welcome to the ShiftedLands player interview. We had a pseudo interview with my brother previously when we covered Dervish and Ghoul, but this is a dedicated video to an individual player, and the individual player with us today is Matt. Say hi, Matt.
Hey, Matt.
And what character do you play?
I play Papageno, Champion of Brass.
Ah, and what is it that Papageno is all about?
Oh man. So
It's a big
Papageno,
question.
right? Like, oh, that's really big. Um,
Try to make it broad so that way you can answer it however you'd like.
yeah. Um, at the core, Papageno wants to do good and wants to have fun. And sometimes he figures out that in order to do good, he has to be more responsible than what he would normally do. And sometimes when he has fun, or even sometimes when he's trying to do good, it doesn't always go the way that he thought it was going to go.
You typically do have a turn of unfortunate events that happens to Papageno pretty regularly.
The luck of Papageno is weird and wacky. There's definitely been times where like a horrible bad thing should have happened, and by pure chance it did not. And then there's other times where I'm like, all right, I've thought this all out. Nothing will go wrong here. And spoiler alert, things went wrong. Uh, so it goes both ways, and it keeps the character fun and fresh.
Awesome. So, what got you into Shifted Lands in the first place?
So two things sort of converged at once. One, I also participate in the SCA, Society for Creative Anachronism,
You're
and
a
I was
titled Baron there, like you have the
yes,
title of Baron,
so
but you're not the active one, I think.
correct, and that's actually what led to it. I was getting ready to take a very large leadership role. I was going to be the Baron of my local group. It's similar in LARP terms to like a chapter head. So about 150 people would be under my purview, and at the same time, I knew some people from Redford, Michigan, and from another game I had played, and that game had broken up, and so they played in this foam weapon LARP. I'd never been in a foam weapon LARP before, but I was like,
Because
I'll go.
SCA is
And
all about heavy metal and stuff
right, we use
for the
in
fighting
order to
part of it.
you have to wear armor, you have to use rattan. Yeah, it's way more into it's not
Authenticity.
quite reenactment, but it's definitely more on like trying to recreate aspects of the Middle Ages. And
Yeah,
so so
anachronism.
yeah, right, and then and anachronism. So anyways, so at the same time as I'm getting ready to take this big responsibility thing, I wanted to just meet up with my friends I knew in Redford, and they were all part of this foam weapon LARP called Shifted Lands. So I got a hold of one of them, looked at the character creation stuff, decided, I want to buy in a little bit, so I'll go as a brownie because that takes a little bit of makeup, but not a lot of makeup.
I was
Um,
interested to know what made you pick Brownie, but keep going with your theory and train of thought. I'll bring it up later.
Yeah. So I slapped on the brown stripe and went to a game, and I honestly only meant to go to one game. I was gonna go once just to see my friends, and I had so much fun. It was a two-parter, and I was there for part one. So much fun, like, well, I got to go back the next month,
Yeah.
and so I did. And I realized I was having a lot of fun at this game, and it was a release because in the SCA I now had responsibility. I had to be in charge of people, and at the LARP I was in charge of no one. I could just do whatever I wanted.
Yeah.
And
The
right, and
liberation.
so exactly. So I went to this LARP to every weekend just do random crazy stuff and not care about the consequences. Uh Fast forward now 9 years later, my character is part of the town council in the LARP and is a champion of the Brass Dragons and is a servant of dreaming and has three in-game children. Like somehow I've still managed to
To
find a
pick
lot
up
of responsibility in the
responsibility
thing I was
finds
going
you.
right? Um, but yeah, that's why I started playing. Um, and I got hooked after the first two games,
And
and
so, how many years have you been playing now?
it'll be 9 years. This month actually marks 9 years.
Dang. Holy free holies.
Yeah.
So what would you say? Oh well, so that I'll bring up the brownie thing. So what made you choose brownie? What made you like when you looked through the list, you were like brownie, that's the one.
So I quickly narrowed down for I wanted to play a race that didn't require a lot of makeup because once again I was only planning on going once, so I didn't want to have to invest in a lot of makeup or wear a bunch of stuff on my face. But I still wanted to not just be a human. I wanted to to be something that put a little bit of skin in the
Yeah,
game.
like playing a fantasy race, like that's part of the appeal. Is like I get to play a fantasy race in a medieval fantasy world. You know.
Exactly. I looked at the various races, immediately saw the folk races, Brownie, Sprite, Fairy, and Spriggan, and thought, oh, these all look really cool. Um, and I read up that Brownies were a little bit more combat-y than the other races. So I was like, oh
Yeah.
well, my goal at first when I joined Shifted Lands was sort of almost a wannabe paladin. One day I'll be a paladin. So I thought, well, folk being more the fighty races, I'll go, or brownie being more the fighty of the folk rather, I will go as a brownie and do that. So so that's basically why I chose brownie early on. Probably also because I love the movie Willow. Um,
Yeah.
not gonna lie, like that may have also been a little bit of a factor there.
I was super because back then you could not see in the current rulebook you can see the elder racials of a
Mhm.
starter race,
Mhm.
and back then you couldn't. So like when I saw that like Elder Brownie had, I think it's that you can spend sorcery to do like a small dance or something.
So yeah, you could spend 2 sorcery and hit for 50. You can't pump it, so you can't spend 4 to do 100, but and uh, you can use it with waylay.
Oh,
It's one
and
of the
like
few things that'll pump
skills.
a waylay. Yeah, so like brownie rogue can be really devastating. I actually sort of stayed away from that a little bit because I didn't want to be too overpowered when I realized what I could
Yeah.
do.
But when I read
um
that, I was like, "Oh my gosh, Papageno is a genius. Like he's
yeah.
a like that's how he's doing damage even though he's a bard."
Yeah.
Why don't we
Oh,
talk about Bard a little bit?
sure. Yeah, let's talk about bard. What do you want to know?
Well, so it's common knowledge to me that you were one of the first people to do Bard, but do you mind sharing that story with us? Like, how did Bard come to be?
Yeah.
What is Bard?
So let's start off with how it came to be. So once again, we'll go back to the SCA here a little bit. In the SCA, there's tons of bards. You throw a dead cat, you hit 7 SCA bards. So when I was coming up with a character concept, I was like, well, this LARP is probably going to be similar. So I'll come in as a bard and have all these songs, that I sort of modified that I knew from the SCA and make them sort of more generic fantasy. And so I came in and I was like, hey, where are the other like singers and performers and everything? And there were
And
none in
everybody looked
game.
at you like, "Huh?"
Right, exactly. I'm like, surely there's people that just sing and entertain, right? They're like, no, not really. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I just started to like sing and perform as just a thing.
Like it just
Um,
what you did, role play, you know?
just as what I did role play. I eventually got like a magic item that would let me like once a game perform and have an effect similar to like what Bard does now. Um, and at the time, like it didn't occur to me what all you could possibly do in the game. And so one day I was like about a year in, and someone came up to me and goes, "Hey Matt, have you ever thought about being like a bard, like with special bard powers as bard things?" I'm like, "Well, that's not in the book. Like I can't.
Yeah, but that's
That
like part of the
that doesn't
game.
exist, right?" And they're like, "Dude, you can like go talk to Jim and Steve, who were two of the plot people at the time. He goes, go talk to them about being like a bard." So I said, all right. So I went over and talked to Jim and Steve, and I'm like, hey, what would you say to like a bard, like someone who can perform and empower people, somebody like the D&D
Mechanically.
stuff, right? And they were like, well, we have wanted to have bard be a thing for a while, but we've had two things really lacking. One, we don't have a rule set written up yet, and two, we've never had someone that's been like really wanting to do it to make it worth it,
Yeah, like I
so we haven't.
really want to be a bard.
Right. And so yeah, so I turned to him like, I'm here to solve one of your two problems. I can't, I don't
Just
know
write
this
the
system well
rules. You
enough
know?
to do it. But yeah, if you write the rule set, and the rules changed a little bit over time, they modified a bit here and there. But yeah, that's how Bard came to be. They took a couple months, and then um Bard was slowly entered into the world. I became the first PC to learn Bard skills, and the first PC to finish the path of Bard. So I've been the longest Bard in game.
Yeah. Like that is such one of the beautiful things about Shifterlands is the foig, and is in my opinion like it's really tough when you first start playing to wrap your head around foig, find out in game, but one of the beautiful things about it is it's also a mechanic to introduce new things like bard.
Yeah.
where
Yeah,
it's like,
right, 'cause if you knew everything about the world, then you'd know, well, Bard isn't a thing. Whereas
yeah,
when there's still mysteries out there that you don't know,
you're like,
then there can
can I?
yeah, then you can be like, "Oh, actually, there are this group of bards. They just never come to town before because 'cause they've never had someone dedicate themselves to performance." And now, like, bard, I would say is I mean, it's a pretty popular path. We
It's a
have even
top
right
notch,
now,
yeah,
we have a newer player. They haven't started playing yet, but, like, they're thinking they wanna go bard.
yeah, like right out the
Um,
gate.
yeah, right out the gate. Um, so I'm glad that it exists. I'm glad people have fun with it, you know?
Yeah, that's really awesome, to be honest. Like, yeah, so Bard's really cool. That's sort of the story about how Bard came around. Um, let's move from Bard to more Papageno-y. Um, what do you think is the arc that Papageno has taken in the since you started playing him? Honestly, has he been? Have you explored any cool concepts with him, or has he always just been like Matt incarnated, or is he like different from Matt? You know, I know that's like a complex question, kind of, but
Yeah. So I would say that there's definitely a lot of Matt Logman in Papageno. There are definitely some differences. Um, uh, Matt is a straight married man in a committed relationship, monogamous relationship. Papageno is none of those things.
yeah,
Um, at all. He still has relationships that he values, like but he's not as he thinks it's okay to have more than one special person in his life. So that's definitely a big difference between Papageno and I would never put my pool or my hand in a pool of random magic. Papageno has and does. So there's those differences as far as risk taking that the two will do. He definitely started out way more carefree. Um, and then there was one event in which Papageno made what I refer to as his worst decision ever. He basically a bad entity was like, "Hey, I'm going to kill you right now unless you do this thing to betray everyone else."
oh
And
no.
yep, and Papageno in that moment he had already died once that game here
Oh
and
wow.
resurrected. And
That's tough.
so yeah, and it was like the perfect scenario if he got left behind accidentally, but he didn't know that. All he knew was he was with a bunch of people, went down, and now when gets brought back up, he's surrounded by bad guys, and so he took the deal. He said, "Yeah, what I need to survive. I need to survive at least one more day. I'll take the deal." And he regrets that he ever did that. But that sort of brought him into this arc of redemption of like trying to redeem himself and not even so much to the rest of town because while people were upset with him in game once they learned why he did it they're like okay well that at least makes sense but he had to redeem himself to himself.
Yeah,
The idea that he had of himself being this person was shattered because he
because
should
his
not have done what he
yeah,
did.
because like mischief turned into crisis.
Right, exactly. So he went through sort of this phase then of trying to redeem himself to himself, and that sort of then led him to having some having some more serious things and taking more responsibility for himself and for others. And I think that's kind of led him to where he is now, as far as in game having three children and being part of the town council, but still also believing kind of you can have it all. Because he also spreads himself out pretty thin as far as the different political people he wheels and deals with and helps out.
Yeah,
Um,
like if
whereas some people. Oh, go
so,
ahead.
I just wanted to provide some perspective to some of the viewers who might not have interacted with Papageno or might not be playing yet, and hopefully they hear something about you and they're like, yeah, I totally want to be a bard now. But Papageno is very active in a lot of the community aspects of outside of the game and a lot of it inside of the game. I think that if you want to know kind of what's going down most of the time, Papageno is a great person to ask. Uh, I wouldn't say go out of your way to go bug him, but like when you run into Papageno, you know you ran into Papageno. And he is a
Yeah,
really cool. I think he's a character that's very pillar of the community for a lot of people. I don't know what every event would be like without Papageno.
I really like being like there's one of the skills in Bard is sort of your ability to like think about something and gain knowledge, right? So, hey, I spent some time, I think about this person, have I heard stories about them? And so I kind of also have viewed that as Papageno's responsibility with knowledge, that um, knowledge has to flow. And not all knowledge necessarily, but it is my job, part of my responsibility as the most longest serving bard in game, to make sure that new characters, new players have the information that they're gonna need to have. And of course, that becomes hard because you never want to overload someone
Yeah.
with, all right, here's 20 years of game history. Do you got it all memorized yet? But you do kind of want to make sure they know that, like, hey, all undead are corrupted here.
Yeah,
There's
like
no such
there's
thing as
no
good
excuse
undead.
for undead, yeah.
Yeah, do not make bargains with undead. It will not go well for you. New players should know that, early on.
Yeah.
New folk should know about folk history, which I won't go into here, but folk the folk races have a very deep and interesting history that they should know about.
A very interesting history for sure. Something I heard something about creating flesh golems or something.
Rumors.
Rumors, slander. uh, so this one's a bit of a tough question. What do you think you've learned from playing Papageno? Like, what do you think Matt has taken away from Papageno? That's a big question. I didn't know I was going to
Uh,
come out with these heavy hitters.
so here's something that not a lot of people know in game, but I'll let this secret out right here and right now. But just know this is out of game knowledge.
This is don't
One
metagame this.
Right. Two out of the three of Papageno's children are not his children by blood. They are adopted. Um, he adopted
Ah,
them to help them out with a certain situation that I won't go into here, but they're adopted. He is an adoptive father. This predates what I do. I am now a foster parent in real life, specifically for refugee children. And so the idea of taking care of youth that are in crisis honestly started with Papageno. And so when I thought about doing it in the real world, obviously it's a little different to,
yeah,
fantasy LARP over the weekend, just talk about, oh yeah, my children are doing this right now.
but it's
But
something that planted that seed.
right, that seed was sort of planted through that. And now in real life, I am a foster parent to refugee children. I have adopted one of them. They are now my son, legally, got the birth certificate and everything.
That's
And
super
so
cool.
yeah, so that I think is probably, I mean, that's a pretty substantial way I feel like that
Yeah, that's a
Papageno
pretty
has
good answer
informed
to that
Matt.
question. That's a pretty good answer. um, so what do you feel is the most important to getting involved in the game? What do you think is important with that aspect?
So this definitely sort of ties into playing a folk, or at least a character who has the brain of a folk. It also gets into a little bit of the meta of the game, but in the end, touch the things, do the adventure. The people that write the plot, that create these items, uh that come up with these storylines, want these things engaged in.
Say
Now,
yes.
yeah, definitely say yes. Now, sometimes say yes will land your character into trouble. All right, Papageno for a while had so many cursed items that he would be regularly checked at the beginning and end of every game to see if he was cursed by a new thing. Like that happened for a while, and deservedly so. I had a lot of curses going on that people didn't know about for a while. Um, and that gave her touching stuff, but it also made the game interesting. It was very interesting to, like, slowly over the course of 8 months become more and more paranoid and upset by things, and think, all right, how am I going to make that happen? Until finally people were like, Papageno's not just upset anymore, like something's wrong with him, and finally investigated. um
They were like, "Oh no,
so
he's cursed."
Right. So Papageno at one point, I'll give an example. Papageno is probably the biggest thing, and this led to him making the bad decision. Papageno had this rag doll. I brought in a
Oh my
rag
gosh,
doll.
the doll! I
Yeah, the doll,
remember the
right?
doll. That was so it was so creepy.
Right? So this rag doll was basically, my character had just had his first kid, and so what I did was I made a little rag doll, and I would say, oh yeah, Papageno plays, but between gathers, he plays with his kid with this little rag doll, and then he brings it to the LARP or to the event so that if he ever like needs to get to her, it has this connection between the
Oh yeah,
two of
the
them.
important the for magical travel purposes.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So this will always get me there. Was kind of the conceit of the doll, right? That's all it was. It was never supposed to be anything else but that. Well, plot sort of futzed with it at one point when I left it behind so it wouldn't get destroyed,
Yeah.
and I came back and the doll like latched itself onto me magically and began speaking in my head. Now at this point, I could have chosen to basically ignore the doll completely and be like, "Nope, not going to engage with this talking doll that only I can hear."
That's
I
creepy.
could right, I could have ignored it. I could have been like, no, shutting this down, but I didn't. I would at night sing lullabies to the doll.
Which this is part
I
of engaging with the game, right?
right, engaging with the game, right? I would, you know, sometimes ask the doll questions about what it thought about things. I would engage in this, and a plot member would be like, "The doll says the following," and that has led to so many things that have change the trajectory of Papageno to make him a more interesting character. Um, so if I had not engaged with that, that wouldn't have happened. So engage with the plot. It'll be okay. In the end, the
They're here to make a
storytelling
good
team, the plot
story.
team, right? They want to make a good story and they want to see you overcome whatever obstacle they've put in your way. The you know the goal is not to defeat the players. The goal is to challenge the players and make them think outside the box and give a riveting story. So engage with it. So that's what I would say as far as um engaging with the world, getting, really getting into character is find something to engage with.
Yeah.
It'll
So
be all right, especially as a new player.
so
You know,
that's
we'll
that's a lot
yeah.
about how like you engage with like how you kind of so that's a good example for people to pick up on like hey if plot wants to do a thing like pick up the ball and start running with it and things are sure to follow. So that was a really good example for like engaging with the game. What about finding your own space in the game, like making your own game per se, not like making your own system but like finding a niche for yourself that's like this is the thing I do.
Yeah. So in a game that's lasted as long as this game has, and with as many players as it does, you're never going to be the only person that, for instance, is very good at casting spirit spells. All right.
Yeah.
You're just not. There are other people that are going to probably have larger spirit casting pools than you, and that's fine. Um, but there are definitely ways to find your niche within that community. So the first thing I would say is, especially for your first PC, uh, go narrow, not broad. Find one or two skills you really want to get involved with and know well, and focus on learning those skills. Um, and then what I would do is keep your eye out for that plot line that people really want to have people engaged in that no one's picking it up.
Yeah.
One of the early plot lines, one of the niches I got into, and why Papageno's connected somewhat to the Fae plot, is there was this thing called the Masquerade for a while that was going on, and no one else was engaging with the
See,
Masquerade
yeah, this
plot
is so
line.
interesting because I've actually because I'm a Nulfidian, personally gone out of the way to be like Fey stuff, not hearing about it, not I,
Right,
because
and that's
Nulfidians.
and that's totally fair. There are things that like fire plane related stuff. My character's like, nope, not
Yeah,
gonna mess with that.
exactly.
Um, so so there's this group called the Masquerade. No one else was really engaging with the plot line. So myself and another PC engaged with it, and it became sort of our niche. We almost had like our own little side plot going on that was just us, because we engaged with it. So so yeah, keep your ears open. Meet those NPCs.
When you hear
I
about things, ask questions.
Yeah, and then I think the other thing that you can do to better understand the game and find your niche, you don't have to do this your first game or even your second game, but NPC
Oh
for a
my
full
gosh,
game
NPCing is amazing.
within your first 3 or 4 games, go an NPC. One, it's free, and you still get all the build, all the experience
And the
that your
food.
character would get, and the food and all the fun, right? Two, by NPCing, you really get to see how how the sausage gets made, and you get to go, oh, okay, this is why decisions are made back in the back.
It's
And
a
I think that'll help guide you in finding your niche because you'll understand a little bit more about the the backroom workings of the LARP, like
yeah.
why some runs are more easily answered than other runs.
Yes.
Why,
It's definitely a curtains reveal kind of thing. Like once you go back in Monster Game, which I totally recommend, everybody should NPC at some point. Um, and it's really cool when you get to like your first game and you're like, "Oh, how does the NPCing stuff work?" Like when me and my buddies came in our first game, we thought that there would be NPCs just walking around in the woods, so we went out into the woods, right? Like, but that's not anywhere close to like how the actual NPC crew worked,
right.
specifically for this game at least. Um, and like there's a lot of preconceptions you have about like how the game is going to go or like how you think things are going to work, and then when you go, and there's kind of a mystical feeling about it when you first start larping. It's like a really awesome feeling. You're like, what's going to happen? I have no idea what is going on. There's a bad side to that, like an overwhelming side of that sometimes, and there's a really mystical, exciting feeling to that. And once you've kind of experienced that, like you've had a couple of games, going back to the monster camp and NPCing and seeing how everything work kind of removes those tinted glasses off of your eyes per se. But it's like for the better, honestly. NPCing, and you get to pick up and you play with all the different skill sets too.
Well, and here's the other little secret about NPCing. Um, we get new players in all the time, and we every new player we want to be to join our game, right? We want them to be a part of our community.
Yeah,
Um, but you only have so many resources as far as man hours and just personal energy to help out every single new player that you can, right? Like
exactly.
we had the 30-day event, we had like 8 new players at that game, like
Holy
fully about a
crap.
yeah, it was about a quarter of town was new players, and that's crazy. I mean, it was a good problem to have. Once we see though that you NPC, your third or fourth game, if you go an NPC, it also means that okay, we out of game see you've now put skin in the game. You are now contributing back, and it makes people I think more willing to work with you. You
Ah,
know,
yes.
because you know what? Hey, I know that you also go an NPC and help out the game. So when you send runs, I'm
I'm
going
inclined
if
to
I'm
answer them
right, I'm more
more
inclined.
so.
I'm just yeah, I'll be flat out and be honest with it. I'm more inclined to answer the run of a PC if I know that that PC NPCs a decent amount of times because I know that they're not only are they giving back, but they're going to have fewer
Yeah.
opportunities to get this run answered because sometimes they're NPCing. So I want when they're not NPCing for their game to be as fun as
And
possible.
it's not like anything maliciously
No,
preferential. It's just like, it's a give and take kind of situation with a lot
right.
of that stuff.
Well, and like you said, with we don't have NPCs out in the forest just wandering around to attack, and that's because we only have so many man hours to have that.
Yeah.
So we have to pick and choose. If we get 10 runs in, we may not be able to answer all 10 runs. With
Yeah.
runs for
That's that's 10
I don't know if
runs
you've
you have to
explained.
answer across. I have not actually talked about runs, but it's essentially you send a message and it goes back to Monster Camp, and Monster Camp answers your run to express the living world.
Yeah.
Uh,
So like if you wanted to learn about the history of the goblins, you could write a run to a goblin historian, right? And an NPC may come in as a goblin to say, "I'm here to tell you about goblin history. Yay!" And
yeah,
they'll tell you. Or if you want to buy a magic item that no one has in town, you can write a run to a merchant and say, "Hey, I'm looking for a ring
these
that does
yeah.
the following things." So yeah, it's a way of
And you
those in town, the PCs, to interact with the broader world that exists.
and the thing that you're trying to one of the things you're trying to express was that like if we have 4 NPCs and 10 runs to answer, then and also adventures to run for people, then that time like very quickly gets eaten up. So
Yeah,
the idea of helping, so in it, like just from a base like look like point of view, when we talk about like I'm more inclined to answer this person's run, it's not super preferential. It's not like malicious intent because like this person actively helps me out. Like, and another thing with NPCing too, I find, is that when you're NPCing, you get to talk to plot marshals the whole time.
Yep.
You get to pitch things to them. You got to say like, "Hey, if you have the time, can you listen to me about X, Y, and Z?" And they're much more inclined to listen to you because they have to sit in the same room.
You also get a good opportunity to eventually. This probably is not going to happen your first or second NPC shift, but over time, you'll realize, oh wait, I have some NPCs that now I always play. So there are some people's mentors that I play as an NPC. So even if I'm PCing, I might go back and play their mentor for an hour or two and come in and answer a run and train them in something. Or I have one NPC that is a guard for a ritual merchant. And so you sort of get sort of your own catalog of NPCs that are yours,
I
and
like to think
you can
Romeo survived the shattering, and Romeo's
right.
still out there somewhere.
I would love to bring back in probably most favorite NPC I ever played, and he's never come back in again. But maybe one day. I played a fainting goat beastman.
Beastman, I heard about that. I didn't meet it, but I heard about it.
It was so much fun to play, and our orc PCs realized that I was a fainting goat, and they would just scare me. And I go ah, and then I'd fall over for 10 seconds, and it was goofy, but it was so much fun. Highly enjoyed it.
Oh my gosh, that sounds amazing. And that's the fun part about NPCing too, is you get I mean, you're at LARP, you're already expressing so much creativity, but when you're NPCing, depending on who's running the game, because different plot marshals run different games,
Oh,
there's very
absolutely.
much a style, and that's what I think that's one of the best things about this game is like this is a Rich Carrizales game versus like this is a Chris Laurie game, right? They're two very different games, but they're held within the same system, and
Hmm.
I really think that's a beautiful thing because it mixes it up, and I don't know where I was going with I had something
Oh,
before
with
that.
NPCing, you get to see like different styles of
Oh,
running and
yeah.
playing, and who
How
does
much
what.
creativity there can be. Like there oh yeah, that's what I was getting at. So there's a ton of creativity on the PC side, like when you're playing your character, it's so inspiring. You go like, "Oh, I could do this about this character." And then once you kind of step in your feet and toes into that, you're like, "Oh, I'm really getting my creative juices flowing here." And then occasionally sometimes you hear no. When you go to NPC, the doors, depending on the person, get blown wide open. Like it's like I want to be a merchant this time, and it's like cool, go play a merchant, my guy. Like I need a
Yeah.
merchant to do X, Y, and Z. That's perfect. Go do this. And then like, oh, I want to fight some stuff. It's like, okay, cool. I need a monster for this. You really get to follow most of the time. You get to follow the whim of like your creativity when you're NPCing.
Oh yeah, and I've come, man. This probably is not going to be coming out before then, but maybe so. Uh, the September Indiana game, I am shotgunning. Shotgun is sort of the second in charge of Monster Camp. They keep
Yeah.
the plot marshal, going, and then they adjudicate things. So the plot marshal is busy, for that game. So I'm shotgunning the September
Did
Indiana
you
event.
shotgun the last day event too, right? For
Yeah, the last day
it's a
event as well. That
follow up on
gargoyle.
that one gargoyle place. Cool.
Yep, yep. It's going to be part two of that. I
Gabe
have
and
a mod that I've thought of that I am so excited to run. And that's the other part of NPCing is you can come in with your own ideas, your own creativity, and say, hey, I want to do a mod, and here's sort of the mechanics I want to go about it. Or, I have these cool decorations. Where I would love to create a scene that does this, or so everything from the Fae are having a tea party, and we're going to invite some PCs to the tea party,
oh man,
and it's going to be all role play, but they have to do certain things during the tea party to follow the Fae rules. To we've made a boat out of some tarps, and we're doing a boat mod where you
dude,
have
this.
to raise and lower the mast in order to sail the
How
boat.
did you feel
Uh,
about that mod, by the way? Because
the boat mod was so cool. So here's the thing. Going back to NPCing and how that can work. Here's the story of two mods. So there was the boat mod, which I'm guessing took a lot of effort to build. Um,
Uh, the two
you know,
when did you go on the boat mod before the big boat
no, I
mod?
did not go on the
So
first boat
there
mod,
was
only the
two
second.
boat mods that both had functioning sails. And then the second boat mod, which is the one you went on, and like it was like cannon fire, so we had NPCs that were maelstroming from one side of the ship, and it was a
Hmm.
big packet war because everybody else on the PC side also went into maelstroms.
Yeah,
So it was two ships, and then after that we combined it into one big ship, which is what the big boat mod came about.
yeah.
Sorry, keep going
So
though.
yeah, so the boat mod was like super cool. It had a working sail that went up and down, and so we had to follow the orders of the captain. It was really neat and tons of fun, and I loved it. But it took a lot of planning, I'm sure, to build, and well worth the effort.
Oh yeah.
The event before that, there was a mod in which all they did was they put some monster parts, like some that we had in Monster Camp, into a wagon and just had some undead pulling the wagon, and we fought off the undead. And that was, and once again, nothing against the boat mod. It was tons of fun. That wagon mod that I'm sure took no time at all to set up
It
and
was like
run
10
was
seconds.
just as fun. I
Yeah.
had so much fun just because we realized the undead were coming for the wagon, and so were like walking the wagon around in circles and having the undead slowly chase us. And at one point I got a ride in the wagon. Um,
Corpse wagon.
the wagon full of corpses, and my character's just laying on top of them, like, yay, this is where I am now. Um, and so you can have things that take a lot of time. Um, and it is and it can be fun and it's worth that time. You can also just sometimes come up with corpse wagon or fainting goat and just go with it, and it'll also work really well.
That
And so I think
is,
that's some of the magic of NPCing is when you have something that just clicks.
yep. Like you fit into. There's so many times when I'm adventuring or I'm playing or where I'm playing Shifted Lands where I'm like, oh my gosh, that is such a cool archetype and it fits perfectly. Like whenever like either sometimes it's a player's character, like Anya, Landschneck Bunny, that's a perfect archetype to be in. Like who would have thought of that? But like combining those two things works like super perfectly. Or like a mod that I'm like, oh, this is a labyrinth mod. Uh there's just so many things that I walk around and I'm like and I get like hit with like this feeling of like, oh wow, that's such a cool idea. Whoever thought of that was like awesome. And like I feel like a lot of people those ideas can come from the simplest things. Just like let's
Yeah,
grab a corpse like that mod came from uh Paula saying, well, we need to do X, so why don't we just but let's also get creative with it. So what's a creative way that we can get people to interact with this thing? And it's like let's have zombies pulling a corpse toward like through town, like they can't miss it. And then like everybody walked down from the hill and was like, are they pulling corpses? And then like boom, from there on, and we heard so much good feedback about that adventure. Like and it really was only like 30 minutes, but it was like the
right.
biggest part of feedback.
Yeah, like it I don't want to say it shouldn't have been fun. Like, I'm not trying to take away from the fun that it was, because it was, but like it
By all means, by all
it
logical reasoning.
right, by all reasoning, if I said, yeah, one of the most fun mods in a weekend that had a lot of fun mods. Like, it wasn't like all the other mods that weekend were bad, but in a weekend that had a lot of fun mods, somehow Wagon was my favorite. And so yeah, no, I highly encourage people, engage with the world. So when you see that wagon full of corpses, follow the wagon. Maybe take a buddy or two with you, but follow the wagon. And then go an NPC, and if you got an idea, throw it out. Like, the worst that's gonna happen is the plot marshal is gonna go, I don't think we can quite do that, but and there something's gonna get spun from that.
Yeah,
You
but
know,
it happens a lot, and it's like
it,
the best part about this.
I'm right, and there's probably so many staples of Shifted Lands that were just someone being like, I don't know, what if the thing that's disenchanting everyone is cows? And now we have these things called disenchant cows that scare the heck out of magic users because we don't want our magic items blown up by cattle.
Yeah, that's pretty funny actually.
Anytime we hear mooing in the distance, we're like,
Oh
what's that?
no, oh no, oh no. And it
Right?
builds a culture too. It builds I think there's a that's part of what builds the unique culture of Shifted Lands. Like you go to like a different game, like you go to a different LARP and then the mechanics kind of incentivize this kind of culture. And then at Shifted Lands, the culture is so different from anything else I've experienced in the LARP sphere. I played a bunch of Dagger here. I've been to Carps. I've explored some other spheres of LARPing, like online role playing, and nothing has felt like Shifted Lands.
Yeah, I think both our rule system and the way that in-game culture has just developed has gone more and more towards team game, right? You cannot be immune or resistant to everything. Something can and will get you. So you
Yeah.
have to have a buddy there. Or two or three. Yeah,
Collaboration.
right. You have to have that collaboration. So I think that's part of it. I think also just being um
It's kind of like how,
because we're just 2 chapters and that's it, we know everyone. Like,
yeah,
so comparing it to the SCA, um, the SCA has a board of directors. I don't know a single one of their names, let alone anything else about them. I can look them up, but I don't know them personally.
but I've had lunch
Whereas,
with a ton of plot marshals.
oh,
Yeah.
I I could drive right now to 2 of the board of advisors house without thinking about it. I know where they live. I can just show up. Probably I should call them ahead of time, but
Yeah.
but I could. I
Papageno
see
knows
them
where you
regularly.
live.
Right. I know them regularly, and because we're a small enough game, now I'm not saying everyone should bug them at once, but if I have a legit concern, I know who I can talk to about it. And I think that's also a big strength of our game.
I really
Um,
love the size of our game. I think it, and obviously we always want new people. Like we are
oh,
totally
absolutely.
happy to expand. But the size of our game, like the active amount of players who regularly show up, and then the mix of players who are in and out, and then the brand new players, it's always the right amount of people. There's never too many people where you're like, oh, I they get lost in the faces.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. If you're a new player and you show up, we'll recognize, oh, hey, here's a new player, and we'll make sure to get you involved.
Yeah,
Because you're not going to get lost in the crowd at any of our events. Um, and yeah, I think that's a huge strength of our game.
yeah. Well, thank you for your time, Matt. I think I think we're about at the hour or 45-minute-ish mark now.
All right.
Well, so thank you. Was there any closing statements that you wanted to get off your chest, or?
I mean, I guess the main thing is, first time is free, guys. If you're interested in it, come and try it out. Probably your best first step is to join our Discord. We're very active Discord.
Yes,
So if
that
you
is where
join
the
it and
most
you
of the community interacts.
exactly, we interact there. And honestly, I think that's another strength of our game is because we interact there, we get to know each other pretty well, and we're able to help out new players, like understand the system a little bit. But also, I would say be comfortable with being uncomfortable in that you're not going to understand all the rules right away.
Oh my gosh, it's such a
Um,
it's a I really like the learning curve of the game. Like
yeah,
it's
you're
like you learn a lower pool, and then you're only worried about your lower pool, and then you get so much of that lower pool that you're like, oh, well, what else can I do? And it's like, well, now you can have an upper pool.
Yeah, I think a lot of people when they first join our game think of it more like a long-running D&D campaign where I'm gonna pre-stat out my character level 1 to
Yeah,
12. And we're not like that. Think
yeah,
of this more like the first time you ever played D&D, where or the first time you ever wrote a bit of short fiction, where you know a little bit about the character, but there's a lot about the character that you're gonna figure out as you play along. So be okay
yeah,
with that discovery. We've all been new players. We've all had to ask the same questions you're going to ask. We've all had that moment of like, wait, what does that do? Oops. And it's
what the
fine.
hell is a relic?
Yeah, exactly. What's a relic? What's an augment?
What's the
All these
difference
things.
between an augment and a path?
Yeah, all of those things will come to you in time. You don't need to know them right away. So,
Yeah.
but that's my suggestion.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. Pillar of the community, guys. Please make sure to check out Papageno. If I imagine that he's okay with you going up and being like, "Hey, are you Papageno?" in game, I'm
Oh yeah.
sure. Like, um, if you run into him, give him a handshake. Thank you for your time, Matt. I think we'll call it there.
All right. Thank you.
Goodbye.